I knew something was wrong before I even killed the engine. You spend 30 years driving the same dirt road every morning, every storm season, every dry summer. You notice when the land feels different. And that afternoon, coming back from a livestock expo outside Amarillo, the whole north end of my property looked wrong somehow. Too clean, too polished, like somebody had dropped a country club in the middle of cattle land. I remember slowing my truck down and just staring through the windshield, dust still rolling past me, thinking maybe I'd taken the wrong turn somehow. Then the sun caught the pavement, and my stomach dropped clean through the floorboard. There was a walking trail running straight across my pasture. Fresh asphalt, black as motor oil, curved through the cedar grass like it belonged there. Wooden benches every 50 yards. Fancy little solar lanterns stuck in the ground. Hell, somebody had even planted decorative flowers along the edges. Right there, on my land. Now maybe that doesn't sound like much to some people, but you gotta understand what that piece of land meant to me. My grandfather, Walter Boone, bought that ranch outside Silver Creek, Oklahoma back in 1961 after returning from Korea. Didn't inherit a dime. Didn't know anybody important. Man worked himself half to death building that place fence post by fence post. My dad used to tell me Grandpa Walter would wrap his hands in rags because they'd split open bleeding from running barbed wire all day. That land fed 3 generations of my family, buried 2 dogs, 6 horses, and 1 marriage out there too. So, no. Seeing joggers and decorative landscaping cutting through it like some suburban park project didn't exactly sit well with me. I pulled the truck over near the north fence and got out slow, boots crunching gravel while I looked around trying to process what I was seeing. And the craziest part was, this thing wasn't halfway done. It was finished, professionally finished, which meant crews had been out there for days while I was gone, and somehow nobody thought maybe they should call the guy who actually owned the property. Then I spotted the sign. Welcome to Prairie Vista Nature Trail, a Silverbrook Estates community experience. Community experience. I actually laughed when I read that. Not because it was funny, but because sometimes your brain just doesn't know what else to do when somebody's got that much nerve. Silverbrook Estates sat right beside my ranch, one of those newer HOA neighborhoods full of oversized mailboxes, matching fences, and people who paid extra money to pretend they lived in the country while complaining about the smell of cows. Me and the HOA had already butted heads a few times over the years. Their president, a real estate guy named Randall Pierce, once tried reporting my cattle because he said hearing them at night ruined property values. Another time, his wife complained my windmill was visually aggressive. I'm not even joking. Visually aggressive. So standing there looking at that trail, I already knew exactly whose fingerprints were all over it. I walked the whole thing that evening while the sun dropped low over the pasture. Every step made me madder. Not loud mad either. The dangerous kind. The quiet kind where your jaw locks up and your mind starts getting real calm. I noticed the trail cut right through the section where deer crossed near the creek bed every morning. They bulldozed mesquite trees my grandfather planted himself. Tore down part of my old fencing too. Probably figured I wouldn't notice. That's the thing about people like Randall Pierce. They think money fixes ownership. If they build something expensive enough, eventually everybody just accepts it. And maybe that works in subdivisions where folks argue over mailbox colors and lawn height. But ranch people are different. Out here, land means something. It remembers who bled for it. By the time I got back to the house, night had settled in and my border collie Duke was waiting on the porch like always. I poured myself a whiskey, sat down in Grandpa Walter's old rocking chair, and stared out toward that glowing little trail in the distance. Could have called the sheriff right then. Could have chained off the entrance. Hell, part of me wanted to drag my tractor straight across the asphalt and rip the whole thing apart. But around midnight, while staring at those tiny lanterns blinking out by the pasture, I had a better idea. And once it hit me, I started smiling so hard Duke actually lifted his head like he was worried about me. Because, see, if the people of Silverbrook Estates wanted a walking trail that badly, maybe it was time they started paying for one. Next morning I was up before sunrise, drinking burnt coffee out of an old feed store mug while making phone calls. First one went to the county surveyor's office. Second one went to my attorney, Earl Maddox, who'd been handling ranch disputes since before I could grow a beard. Earl answered on the second ring sounding half asleep and said, "Let me guess. Randall Pierce finally did something stupid enough to make the newspaper?" I told him about the trail, and there was this long silence before he just started laughing. Not polite laughter either. Deep, wheezing, old man laughter. Don't touch a damn thing yet, he said. Let them keep digging. By noon, the survey crew was out there marking boundaries with bright orange stakes and little flags whipping around in the wind. I followed them on my ATV while one young kid checked coordinates on a GPS tablet. Every few minutes, he'd look over at me like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Finally, he said, "Sir, this entire trail's inside your property line." I said, "Yeah, son, I know." What shocked me wasn't that they crossed the line. It was how far they crossed it. Nearly 300 yards of paved trail sat directly on my ranch. Benches, lights, landscaping, all of it. Somebody from that HOA had signed off on construction without verifying a single legal boundary. Either arrogance or stupidity. Usually with people like Randall. It's both. Around 2 that afternoon, I noticed movement near the trail entrance. Couple women in workout clothes pushing strollers. Some older guy power walking with headphones on. 2 teenagers riding bikes, like they'd been using the thing all week. They waved at me too, smiling all friendly because they assumed I was some ranch hand maintaining the property. One lady even yelled, "Beautiful trail y'all built out here." I almost admired the confidence. That evening, Earl drove out in his old Lincoln Continental with legal folders stacked in the passenger seat. He walked the trail with me slow and careful, occasionally tapping his cane against the asphalt. "This ain't an accident," he muttered finally. "Contractors don't pave this much land by mistake." Then he stopped beside one of the benches and smiled this little devil smile I'd seen in courtrooms before. "You know what the funny part is?" he said. "They improved your property value using their own money." That's when the whole thing shifted in my mind. Up until then, I'd been angry. But suddenly, I saw opportunity. Randall Pierce thought like a developer. Numbers, optics, control. Guys like that only understand one language in the end: leverage. So we gave him some. 3 days later, I installed a steel wrench gate right where the trail connected to Silverbrook Estates. Heavy, black iron. Welded myself with help from my nephew Cody. We mounted it deep in concrete and hung a big white sign across the center. PRI Fate. Property. TRES passers will be prosecuted. Cody stepped back admiring it and said, "Looks kinda dramatic." I told him, "That's because subtlety doesn't work on HOA people." By breakfast the next morning, all hell broke loose. My phone started ringing around 7:15. Unknown numbers mostly. Angry residents demanding to know why the trail was closed. One woman left a voicemail saying her morning jogging routine was being emotionally disrupted. Another guy threatened to contact the news because his property taxes supposedly helped fund community recreational access. Community recreational access on my ranch. Around 9, Randall finally showed up in person. I saw his silver Mercedes bouncing down my dirt driveway, throwing dust everywhere before he even got out. Man climbed out wearing loafers, pressed jeans, and one of those fake cowboy hats rich suburban guys buy after visiting Texas twice. He slammed my gate shut behind him and marched up onto the porch like he owned the place. "You need to remove that gate immediately," he snapped. Didn't even say hello. I stayed sitting in Grandpa Walter's rocking chair, sipping coffee. "Morning to you too, Randall." He pulled out this folded brochure from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto my table. Silverbrook Estates newsletter. Right there on the cover was a smiling couple jogging down my pasture trail under the headline, "Ian Hanking Community Living Tours Raid and All Too." I looked up at him and said, "You printed brochures before checking who owned the land?" His face tightened. "Our development company purchased access rights during preliminary planning." "No," I said calmly. "You assumed you did." That's when I handed him the survey packet. Full property maps, county stamps, GPS coordinates, everything. He flipped through it faster and faster, color draining right out of his face. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head while he realized how bad this was. "Now hold on," he said finally, lowering his voice. "There's no reason this needs to become hostile. Funny thing about men like Randall, they only discover diplomacy after leverage changes hands." I leaned back in the chair and said, "Hostile was paving over my grandfather's land while I was out of town." He tried shifting gears again. Started talking about how the trail improved local property values, increased neighborhood safety, encouraged outdoor activity for families. Whole sales pitch sounded rehearsed. Then came the line that really told me who he was. "You have more land than you even use, Wade." That sentence sat there between us for a second. More land than you use. Like ownership only mattered if every inch produced profit. Like history and memory had no value unless somebody monetized them. I stood up slow and walked him to the edge of the porch, where you could see the north pasture stretching out under the wind. "See those trees by the creek?" I asked. "My grandfather planted those after my grandmother died." Randall didn't say anything. "That fence line over there? Me and my dad rebuilt it after the tornado of '98. Still nothing." "You think because something's quiet? Because nobody built condos on it? Because cows walk through it instead of Teslas? It means nobody cares about it." Randall crossed his arms. "This doesn't need to turn into a legal war." "Too late," I said. "Earl already filed. And buddy," the look on his face after that was worth every second of stress this thing caused me. But I still wasn't done. Not even close. That weekend, Silverbrook Estates hosted some kind of neighborhood wellness event. Yoga classes, smoothie stands, live acoustic music. Whole thing built around celebrating their precious new trail. They'd advertised it for weeks apparently. Hundreds of residents expected. Randall probably thought I'd caved before then. He didn't know me very well. Saturday morning, before sunrise, Cody and I loaded something into the back of my truck and drove out to the trail entrance. By 8 a.m., right as the first residents started gathering near the gate, we finished setting it up. A full metal turnstile gate, salvaged from an old county fairground auction years earlier. Ugly as sin. Loud as a prison door every time it turned. Above it hung a giant hand-painted sign that read, "Boo 1, Family Trail Access, $10 per person. Cash only, no exceptions." Cody stared at it for a second, then busted out laughing so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. "Uncle Wade," he wheezed, "this is the pettiest thing you've ever done." I looked over at the growing crowd gathering outside the gate and said, "No, son, this is business." And right then, watching those HOA residents slowly realize they'd have to pay money to walk on the trail they thought already belonged to them, I got to admit, it felt pretty damn good. For about 30 solid seconds, nobody moved. Folks just stood there staring at that turnstile like their brains couldn't quite process what they were seeing. You had women in designer workout sets holding yoga mats under their arms, dads with expensive jogging strollers, retirees clutching little water bottles and fitness trackers, all frozen silent while the morning sun came up over my pasture. Then somebody finally read the sign out loud. $10? A younger guy wearing wireless earbuds stepped forward first. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You can't charge people to walk here." I leaned back in my folding chair beside the gate and shrugged. "Actually, I can. It's private property." He pointed toward the trail behind me. "The HOA paid for this path." "Sure did," I said. "Best renovation my ranch ever got." Couple people laughed at that, mostly nervous laughter, but others were getting mad now. One woman marched right up to the turnstile holding a tiny white dog against her chest like she was preparing for battle. "My children use this trail every morning," she snapped. "Well, ma'am," I said, "children are half price under 12. Cody nearly choked trying not to laugh behind me. Before long, there was a whole line of frustrated residents arguing back and forth while acoustic guitar music from the wellness festival drifted awkwardly through the background. Honestly, if somebody had filmed the whole thing, it probably would have gone viral. Then Randall arrived. And Buddy? You could spot his mood from 50 yards away. He stormed through the crowd red-faced and sweating, his wife trailing behind him whispering for him to calm down. "Take this circus down immediately," he barked the second he reached me. "You're humiliating this community." "Funny," I said, counting cash into an old cigar box. "That's exactly what Earl said your lawsuit's gonna do in court." He leaned closer then, lowering his voice so the residents couldn't hear. "What do you actually want?" There it was. Not an apology, not accountability, just negotiation. Because deep down Randall still thought this was about money. Truth is, by then it wasn't only about money anymore. It was about respect. About people thinking rural land existed for their convenience. About wealthy developers acting like anything quiet and old-fashioned could just be absorbed into their little master-planned worlds. I stood up and looked him square in the eye. "You really want to know what bothers me most?" I asked. "It's not the asphalt. It's not the benches. Hell, half the county actually likes the trail." He blinked, confused. "Then what is it? You never asked." That shut him up. Just for a second, but long enough. Because that was the whole thing right there. One simple act of basic respect could have changed everything. If Randall had knocked on my door 6 months earlier and said, "Mr. Boone, we'd love to partner with you on a community trail," maybe we could have worked something out. Maybe Grandpa Walter's land could have been shared the right way. But men like Randall didn't ask permission from people they considered beneath them, and that arrogance finally cost him. By Monday morning, the HOA board was in full panic mode. Residents were furious. Local Facebook groups were tearing them apart. Somebody posted a video of me collecting trail fees beside the turnstile, and people across the county started calling me the toll booth cowboy. Even the local radio station talked about it during their morning segment. Earl called laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Wade," he said, "you somehow turned a property dispute into public entertainment." But behind all the jokes and headlines, Silverbrook Estates had a real problem. Their biggest selling point, the fancy nature trail, was now controlled by the guy they tried steamrolling over. Homeowners started demanding HOA refunds. Realtors complained open house traffic was getting disrupted, and every single day that turnstile stayed up, Randall lost leverage. 3 days later, he came back out to the ranch alone. No Mercedes this time either, just a dusty pickup truck that looked borrowed. He found me repairing fence near the creek bed around sunset. Didn't say much at first. Just stood there awkwardly while cicadas buzzed through the grass. Finally, he said, "I handled this wrong." I kept working another minute before answering. "Yeah, you did." Then came the offer, $1,000 a month for permanent unrestricted trail access. HOA covers all maintenance. Full liability protection for the ranch. Written acknowledgement the land remained entirely under Boone family ownership. And maybe the funniest part of all, every future neighborhood map would officially label it Boone Creek Trail. My grandfather's name back where it belonged. Randall handed me the contract draft like it physically hurt him to do it. "Board approved it this morning," he muttered. I read through the pages slow while the wind moved through the grass around us. Part of me wanted to refuse out of pure stubbornness. Shut the whole thing down forever. But another part of me, maybe the older, calmer part, realized something. Land doesn't always have to become a battlefield. Sometimes the real win is making sure people remember who it belongs to. So I signed it. These days, every first Friday of the month, a Silverbrook Estates employee drives out and drops off the HOA check in my mailbox. The trail's still there too. Families walk it every evening. Kids ride bikes past the creek. Folks wave at me now instead of acting like I'm invisible. Couple residents even stop sometimes to ask about Grandpa Walter or the history of the ranch. Funny how respect changes people. Though every now and then, usually around sunset, I'll drive my ATV down near the old turnstile gate we left standing beside the entrance. Most people think it's there for decoration now, little reminder of the drama. But me, I leave it there because sometimes people need a visible reminder that just because land looks empty doesn't mean nobody fought to keep it. And honestly, I still laugh every time I see joggers passing beneath that Boone Creek Trail sign, knowing the whole thing started because one HOA president thought a rancher wouldn't notice a few hundred yards of missing pasture. But here's the question I still think about sometimes. If somebody built something beautiful on land they had no right to touch, and the whole community ends up loving it, should the owner tear it down out of principle, or let it stay for the greater good? I still don't know the perfect answer to that. So tell me what you think down in the comments. Was I justified for charging them and forcing that lease agreement? Or should I bulldoze the whole trail the second I found it? And if somebody crossed your property line without asking, what would you have done?